All right, strap in, everybody. We're diving deep into ancient Mesopotamia today.
But we're not going to be talking about the usual pyramids and pharaoh stuff. No.
No, not this time. We're going way deeper. We're looking at what happened after the Sumerian Renaissance, a
No.
time that you might have heard of,
Yeah.
when Sumerian culture had this huge resurgence.
What's really fascinating is how things took an even more, well, interesting turn with a group called the Amorites.
And this is where things get really cool. These Amorites, they weren't your typical conquerors. They
Right.
weren't just coming in and wiping everything out. They were more like culture adopters. It's like imagine conquering Rome, and deciding, hey, you know what, this Roman thing, this isn't so bad. Let's do this.
Right. Let's just become Romans.
Yeah, basically, that's kind of the Amorite story. They inherited this civilization, this advanced civilization,
Right.
and somehow made it even more awesome.
Really challenges the idea that, conquering is all about just wiping out what was there before.
Mm-hmm.
The Amorites, they certainly had their power, but they also had this ability to integrate themselves
Yeah.
into the Mesopotamian world. And in doing so, they really shaped its future in this unique way.
So to really grasp all this, we need to rewind a little bit.
Okay.
We need to go back to that Sumerian Renaissance that we talked about. Can you give us a quick rundown of what was happening back then?
Well, you had the collapse of the Akkadian Empire, which had ruled a big chunk of Mesopotamia for a while.
Right.
After they fell apart, you had this amazing comeback of Sumerian culture and power.
Mm.
And you see this with figures like Agudea of Lagash.
Oh, yeah.
He was a ruler who had all these incredible statues and temples built. I mean, it was a real golden age for Sumerian art and architecture.
Wow.
And this resurgence was so crucial because it really set the stage for this new power to emerge, the third dynasty of Ur.
So it's like this historical passing of the torch. The Sumerian Renaissance kind of set the stage for the Amorites to come in.
Exactly. And with the third dynasty of Ur, things start to get really interesting.
All right.
Around 2112 BC, their king, Ur-Nammu, he takes over the city of Urk and establishes this incredibly powerful dynasty. They basically unify Mesopotamia.
Wow.
All those independent city-states,
Yeah.
now they're answering to Ur.
I can't even imagine the bureaucracy involved in managing all of that.
Oh, it must have been incredible.
Yeah. But seriously, what was life like under the third dynasty of Ur? It sounds like they were kind of a big deal.
They were a huge deal.
Yeah.
Think about it. Bustling trade networks, an efficient administration. The entire region was thriving.
Mm.
And today, you can still see evidence of this prosperity.
Oh, really?
In the ziggurat at Ur,
Oh, wow.
this massive stepped pyramid, it's still standing.
Yeah.
It's a real testament to their architectural skills. They weren't just powerful,
Yeah.
They were sophisticated.
Okay, so we've got this advanced Mesopotamian civilization
Right.
humming along,
Mm-hmm.
and then enter the Amorites. But before they take center stage, who were they?
Yeah.
Were they just kind of lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance?
Well, initially they were semi-nomadic,
Okay.
living on kind of the edges of this Mesopotamian world.
Okay.
They weren't completely unknown to the region, but they definitely weren't at the center of things.
All right. So what changed? How did they go from these fringe dwellers to inheriting
Right.
this entire civilization? I mean, that's quite a jump.
It's a huge jump. And that's where the decline of the third dynasty of Ur comes in.
Okay.
Towards the end of the 21st century BC, things started to unravel for them.
Mm-hmm.
You had famine, you had drought, the classic recipe for an empire's downfall.
Right.
This really weakened the third dynasty, and it created this opportunity, this opening for the Amorites to step in. It wasn't just about brute force,
Yeah.
It was about stepping into this power vacuum.
So right place, right time,
Mm-hmm.
and the ambition to seize that moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where their story takes this really fascinating turn. Instead of just coming in and destroying what was there before, they adopted it. They assimilated into it.
That's not your typical conqueror's playbook.
Yeah.
It's more like, who, if you can't beat them, join them,
Yeah.
and then make it even better.
Right.
But how did this assimilation actually happen? I mean, did they just flip a switch and suddenly switch cultures overnight?
Well, think of it more as a gradual process.
Okay.
Their migration, it started in Palestine and Syria
Mm-hmm.
and eventually led them to Mesopotamia.
Okay.
And as they moved, they interacted with the existing Mesopotamian culture, and they began to incorporate elements of it.
Okay.
The language,
Yeah.
the writing system, even the administrative techniques.
So they're like these cultural sponges, just absorbing the best of what Mesopotamia had to offer.
Exactly.
But they didn't just adopt everything, right?
No.
They established their own kingdoms and cities too.
Absolutely. And before Babylon became, the big name everyone knows, there was Mari, this really powerful Amorite kingdom that became a center for spreading Babylonian culture.
Wow.
They weren't just rulers,
Yeah.
They were actively spreading the civilization that they had adopted.
So they're flourishing, spreading culture. Things seem to be going pretty well. But empires rarely stay at the top forever, right? What happened to Mari?
Well, like a lot of empires, they fell victim to internal struggles and the burdens of expansion. You have power feuds, you have constant wars with your neighbors like Elam.
Yeah.
And all this weakened them over time. It's the classic rise and fall.
Yeah.
Even for cultures that borrow and adapt.
It's a reminder that even when it seems like you have it all, things can change pretty quickly.
Definitely. Nothing lasts forever.
Now, before we get to Babylon, there's one more figure we need to talk about. King Shamshi-Adad. Oh, yes.
What's his role in all of this?
Shamshi-Adad, he was a fascinating character. For a time, he actually managed to unify the Amorites.
Oh, wow.
And he achieved some pretty impressive military victories. But after his death, well, you'd probably guess what happened.
More power struggles.
Yeah.
It seems like every time things start to settle down in history, somebody's always trying to grab the throne.
You got it. Succession disputes were a constant problem. When a ruler died, there wasn't a clear system for who would take over.
Oh.
So you had infighting,
Yeah.
instability, and that's exactly what happened after Shamshi-Adad died. The kingdom fragmented, and other city-states like Larsa, and importantly Babylon, they saw an opportunity to grab some power.
So it was basically a chaotic free-for-all. Everybody's trying to take advantage of the situation.
Exactly. And in all of this chaos, Babylon begins its rise to prominence.
Now, this is where it gets really intriguing. They go from these fringe dwellers to inheriting a civilization.
To becoming this major player in Mesopotamian politics. How did this happen? What led to this incredible rise?
Well, in the middle of all this conflict, you have this alliance that forms between Mari and Babylon.
Wow, a powerful combination.
Yeah, and they win a decisive victory. And in this victory, Babylon takes the leading role.
Oh, wow.
So this victory, it gives them prestige, it gives them influence, and it really sets the stage for the arrival of one of the most famous figures in Mesopotamian history, Hammurabi.
Ah, Hammurabi. Now that's a name I've even heard of. I'm just a casual history fan. What was it about Hammurabi that made him so significant?
Hammurabi isn't just significant, he's iconic. He ruled Babylon for over 40 years, from 1792 to 1750 BC. And during his reign, he transformed Babylon into the most powerful city-state in all of Mesopotamia.
Wow, 40 years. That's a seriously long time to be in power, especially in ancient times when things were, let's just say, a bit less stable. What was his secret? Was he just a brilliant military strategist?
He was a skilled military leader, no doubt. But his real genius was in how he combined that military power with really shrewd diplomacy and most importantly, a focus on law and order.
Law and order. That doesn't sound very exciting for a powerful ruler. Shouldn't you be out there leading armies, conquering new lands?
Conquering is one thing, but governing a vast and diverse empire like Babylon, that's a whole other challenge.
Right.
And that's where Hammurabi's famous law code comes in.
Yeah.
This is one of the oldest and most complete legal codes we have from the ancient world.
Oh, wow.
And it gives us these incredible insights into Babylonian society.
So he wasn't just a warrior king, he was a lawmaker as well. That's pretty surprising. What kind of laws are we talking about here? What did these ancient laws cover?
Well, they didn't have parking tickets back then, but they did have laws governing pretty much every aspect of life.
Wow.
From trade and commerce to marriage and family disputes to, yes, even crimes and punishments.
Okay.
It's fascinating to see how they approached justice, what they valued.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really gives you a sense of what life was like in Babylon during that time.
So it sounds like this law code wasn't just some abstract set of rules. It actually impacted people's daily lives in a very real way.
Absolutely. By establishing these clear laws and punishments, Hammurabi created a more stable, predictable society. And that was one of the key reasons why Babylon flourished under his rule.
Right, because when people know what to expect,
Mm-hmm.
what the consequences are,
Yeah,
it creates a sense of order, and that allows society to function more smoothly.
exactly.
I see what you mean. It makes sense that a stable, predictable society would be more prosperous. But I have to admit, I've always heard that this law code was pretty brutal, an eye for an eye and all that.
It's true. Some of the punishments in Hammurabi's code seem harsh by today's standards.
Yeah.
The principle of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, is definitely there.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that this was a very common concept in ancient societies. It was about retribution and deterring people from committing crimes in the first place.
So it's a reflection of a different time and a different mindset.
Right.
But even with those harsh punishments,
Right.
the code wasn't just about cruelty, was it?
No, not at all. What's fascinating is that the code also included provisions to protect the vulnerable in society,
Oh, interesting.
like widows and orphans.
Okay.
And it regulated business practices to prevent people from being exploited. So it wasn't a perfect system by any means, but it shows an attempt to create a fairer society
Okay.
based on values of their time.
Right. It's a reminder that when we look at history, we need to try to understand it within its own context and not just judge it based on our modern day values. Now, I have another question about the Amorites themselves.
Okay.
If they adopted so much of Mesopotamian culture, did they retain any of their own traditions and beliefs? Or did they just completely lose their own identity in the process?
That's a question that historians are still grappling with.
Yeah.
It's difficult to know for certain how much of their original culture survived. We do know that the Amorites had their own pantheon of gods,
Okay.
but they also incorporated Mesopotamian deities into their religious beliefs.
Oh, okay.
So it seems like it was more of a blending of cultures and on religious practices rather than a complete erasure of their own heritage.
So more of a two-way street than a one-way assimilation.
Exactly. It's a complex process, and it's likely that the Amorites held on to some aspects of their own traditions
Right.
while embracing elements of Mesopotamian culture. They were adapting and evolving,
Yeah.
creating a unique blend that reflected their own history and their new environment.
That makes sense. It's a reminder that cultural exchange isn't always about one culture completely dominating another.
Right.
It can be a much more dynamic and nuanced process. All right, so we've got this incredible law code, a flourishing empire,
Yeah.
and this fascinating mix of cultural influences.
It's an amazing story.
Is there anything else we should know about Hammurabi and his legacy? What else did he accomplish during his reign?
Well, besides establishing the law code, Hammurabi also invested heavily in infrastructure. He built canals, temples, palaces,
Oh, wow.
all of which helped to solidify Babylon's position as a major economic and cultural center.
So he was clearly a ruler who knew how to manage and grow an empire,
Yeah,
not just through conquest, but through smart investments and strategic planning.
exactly. He wasn't just a conqueror.
Right.
He was a builder.
He sounds like the ultimate multitasker.
Right.
Juggling military campaigns,
Right.
legal reforms,
Yeah.
massive building projects. He must have had an incredible amount of energy.
I really did.
But even the greatest empires eventually decline, right?
Right.
What led to the fall of Hammurabi's Babylon? Was it a sudden collapse, or was it more of a gradual process?
That's a great question. And it's a reminder that even the most powerful empires are not invincible. While Hammurabi himself died in 1750 BC, Babylon remained a dominant force in the region for a while after that.
Okay.
However, his successors faced a growing number of challenges, both internal and external. There were revolts within the empire,
Okay.
pressure from neighboring kingdoms,
Right.
and yes, you guessed it, more of those pesky succession disputes.
The succession disputes, it seems like they were just a recurring problem in ancient Mesopotamia.
They really were.
Every time a ruler died, it created this opportunity for instability and conflict. So it sounds like a combination of internal strife and external pressure ultimately led to Babylon's decline.
You got it. And eventually those pressures became too much for Babylon to withstand.
Okay.
In 1595 BC, the Hittites, a powerful Anatolian people, they sacked the city,
Wow.
marking the end of the First Babylonian Empire.
It's fascinating how even an empire as mighty as Babylon,
Yep.
built on such a strong foundation, eventually succumbed to the forces of history.
It really is.
It's a reminder that nothing lasts forever, even in the ancient world.
Absolutely.
But before we move on, let's take a moment to appreciate just how influential the Amorites, and in particular Hammurabi, were in shaping the course of Mesopotamian history.
It's truly remarkable. The legacy they left behind continues to resonate with us today. Their story teaches us about cultural exchange, the evolution of civilizations, the enduring power of ideas.
It's amazing to think that a group of people who started out as semi-nomadic herders on the fringes of civilization ended up playing such a pivotal role in shaping one of the world's first empires.
It's incredible.
Their story really challenges our assumptions about history and reminds us that the past is full of surprises.
Absolutely. The Amorites weren't just conquerors. They were builders. They were innovators. And as we've seen, incredibly adept at adapting to new circumstances. They embraced the opportunities that were presented to them. They learned from the cultures that they encountered. And ultimately, they made their own unique mark on history.
Their story is a reminder that history isn't just about dates and battles. It's about people, cultures, and this complex interplay of forces that shape our world. And it makes me wonder what other hidden stories are waiting to be discovered. What other fascinating twists and turns lie hidden within the annals of history?
That's a question worth pondering. The past is full of untold stories, waiting for us to unearth them, to piece together the puzzle of human history.
It's incredible to think how much we can learn from a civilization that existed thousands of years ago.
It really is.
But it's not just about the past, right?
Right.
What can we as listeners in the 21st century take away from the Amorites and their journey? What makes this deep dive relevant to our lives today?
That's a fantastic question. And I think one of the most powerful takeaways is how the Amorites challenge our assumptions about cultural identity. They weren't just conquerors or adapters. They were both. They were shaping the world around them, and at the same time, they were being shaped by that world. It really makes you think about how cultures evolve and interact.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's like that saying, we're all products of our past, but we don't have to be prisoners of it. The Amorites took their past experiences and they blended them with their new reality to create something entirely new and unique.
Exactly. And that idea of cultural fluidity, it's so relevant today. Especially in a world that's becoming increasingly interconnected through globalization and migration. It encourages us to move beyond seeing cultures as fixed and unchanging, and instead view them as dynamic processes that are always in flux.
It's a much more nuanced and frankly more exciting way to look at the world, wouldn't you say? Instead of trying to fit everything into neat little categories, we can appreciate the messy, the vibrant tapestry of human history and culture.
Absolutely. And on a more personal level, the Amorite story reminds us that we're all capable of change and adaptation. We can learn from different cultures, embrace new ideas, and evolve our own identities without losing sight of our roots.
It's almost as if they're giving us permission to grow and change without fear of losing ourselves in the process. We can be open to new experiences and different ways of thinking while still honoring our heritage.
Exactly. And that's such an empowering message, both for individuals and for societies as a whole. It's about recognizing the richness that diversity brings and understanding that our differences can be a source of strength rather than division.
Well, this deep dive has been a whirlwind journey through ancient Mesopotamia, full of surprising twists, fascinating characters, and valuable insights. Who knew the Amorites had so much to teach us about history, culture, and even ourselves?
It's been an incredible journey, that's for sure. And it leaves us with some thought-provoking questions to ponder. What other hidden stories are out there waiting to be discovered? And how can we apply the lessons of cultural fluidity to our own lives and to the world around us? These are questions worth exploring further.
Absolutely. So to our listener out there, we leave you with this final thought. The next time you encounter a culture that seems different or unfamiliar, remember the Amorites, dig a little deeper, look for the connections.
And you might be surprised by what you discover.
You really might.
Who knows?
You might even find a reflection of yourself in the most unexpected places.
It's true.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the Amorites. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating adventure through history.
See you then. It's amazing how the Amorites show us that civilizations change not just through conquest, but also through assimilation and adaptation. Makes you think, doesn't it? How many cultures that we think of as like one solid thing are actually a result of this fascinating mix over time?
Yeah, it really changes how I think about history. Like, not as separate little boxes on a timeline, but as this constant flow of influences back and forth. It's a much more dynamic view, I think. So we've got Babylon, right, on the rise, a key player in the region. And then comes Hammurabi. I mean, even I've heard of him.
Of course.
And I'm just a casual history fan. What was it about this guy that made him so important?
Well, Hammurabi's not just important, he's iconic. He ruled Babylon for over 40 years, from 1792 to 1750 BC. And during his time as king, he made Babylon the most powerful city-state in Mesopotamia.
40 years. Wow. You don't stay in power for that long without being, well, pretty good at it. What was his secret? Was he just a brilliant military leader, just conquering left and right?
He was a skilled military leader, absolutely. But his real strength was how he combined that military power with really smart diplomacy, and most importantly, I think, this focus on law and order.
Law and order. That doesn't really sound very glamorous for a powerful ruler, does it? I always picture them out there leading armies and, expanding their empire and all that.
Well, conquering is one thing. Governing a huge and diverse empire like Babylon, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And this is where Hammurabi's famous law code comes in. It's one of the oldest and most complete sets of laws we have from the ancient world.
Really?
And it gives us amazing insights into what Babylonian society was like.
So he wasn't just a warrior king. He was like a lawmaker, too. That's pretty surprising. What kind of laws are we talking about here? What did these ancient laws actually cover?
Oh, they didn't have parking tickets back then. But they did have laws for pretty much every part of life you can imagine.
Wow.
Trade, business, marriage, family problems, even crimes and punishments, all of it. It's really interesting to see how they thought about justice back then, what was important to them. It really paints a picture of what daily life was like in Babylon.
It sounds like this law code wasn't just some document sitting in a dusty archive somewhere. It really affected how people live their lives, huh?
Absolutely. When Hammurabi made these clear laws and punishments, he created a more stable and predictable society. And I think that's a big reason why Babylon did so well under his rule.
Yeah, I can see that. When people know what's expected of them,
Right.
they know what the consequences are for breaking the rules,
Right.
it creates a sense of order, and then things run more smoothly.
Exactly. That's exactly what Hammurabi achieved.
Okay, I'm following you. It makes sense that a stable, predictable society would be more prosperous. But I've always heard that this law code was pretty brutal. The whole an eye for an eye thing.
It's true. Some of the punishments in Hammurabi's code seem harsh compared to what we're used to today. The an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth idea, oh yeah, it's definitely there. But it's important to remember, this was a very normal concept for ancient societies. It was about revenge and about making sure people thought twice before doing something wrong.
So it's like we have to view it in the context of their time and their beliefs.
Right.
But even with those harsh punishments, the code wasn't just about being mean, was it?
Not at all. It's actually pretty amazing because the code also had parts that were meant to protect people who were vulnerable, like widows and orphans.
Oh, interesting.
And set rules for businesses to make sure people weren't being taken advantage of. It wasn't perfect, no system is, but it does show a real attempt to create a fairer society, based on what they valued at the time.
It makes you realize that when we look back at history, we have to try to understand it from their point of view, not just judge it based on what we think is right today.
Definitely.
Now, I have another question about the Amorites. If they took on so much of Mesopotamian culture, did they keep any of their own traditions or beliefs? Or did they completely lose their own identity?
That's a question that historians are still trying to figure out.
Yeah.
It's hard to know for sure how much of their original culture stuck around. We do know that they had their own set of gods,
Okay.
but they also started including Mesopotamian gods into their beliefs. It seems like it was more of a mixing of cultures and religions, not a complete replacement.
So it was kind of a two-way exchange, not just them completely absorbing everything.
Right. It's complicated.
Yeah.
And probably The Amorites held on to certain parts of their traditions while embracing parts of Mesopotamian culture. They were adapting, evolving, making this unique blend that showed their own history and the new world they were living in.
Makes sense. It reminds me that cultural exchange isn't always one culture totally taking over another. It can be this much more, back and forth process.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got this incredible law code, we've got this thriving empire, we've got this mix of cultural influences. Anything else we should know about Hammurabi's legacy? What else did he do while he was king?
Besides the law code, Hammurabi really put a lot of effort into building things up. Canals, temples, palaces, all that. This really helped make Babylon a major center for economics and culture. He was a ruler who knew how to grow an empire, not just conquer it.
He sounds like he could handle anything, huh? Military campaigns, legal reforms, building projects. Wow, I bet he had tons of energy.
He must have.
But even the most amazing empires eventually fall apart, right?
Yeah.
What happened to Hammurabi's Babylon? Did it just collapse all of a sudden, or was it more of a slow decline?
That's a good question. And it reminds us that even the strongest empires aren't unbeatable. Hammurabi died in 1750 BC, but Babylon kept going strong for a while after that.
Hmm.
His successors, though, they ran into more and more problems, both inside and outside the empire.
Oh, what kind of problems?
Well, there were revolts within the empire, pressure from nearby kingdoms, and yep, you guessed it, more of those succession disputes.
Ugh, those succession disputes. Sounds like they were a never-ending problem back then. Every time a king died, it was like chaos time.
It really was.
So it was this mix of problems within the empire and pressure from outside that brought Babylon down.
That's it. And after a while, that pressure became too much for Babylon to handle. In 1595 BC, the Hittites, they were a powerful people from Anatolia. They attacked and captured Babylon. That was the end of the First Babylonian Empire.
Wow, it's kind of mind-blowing, right? This empire, Babylon, so strong, built on such a solid base, and it eventually falls apart, makes you think that nothing lasts forever.
It really does.
But before we move on, let's take a moment to just appreciate how important the Amorites, especially Hammurabi, were in shaping what happened in Mesopotamia.
Absolutely. It's remarkable, really. What they left behind continues to affect us today. Their story shows us how cultures interact, how civilizations change over time, how powerful ideas can be.
It's amazing to think that these people who started out as herders, nomads, way out on the edge of civilization, ended up having such a huge impact in creating one of the world's first empires. It really makes you question what you think you know about history.
It definitely does. It shows us that the past is full of surprises. The Amorites, they weren't just conquerors. They built things, they came up with new ideas, and as we've seen, they were really good at adapting to new situations. They took the opportunities that came their way, they learned from other cultures, and they made their own mark on history, a unique mark.
They really did. Their story is a reminder that history isn't just dates and battles. It's about the people, cultures, and all these different forces that interact. Absolutely.
To shape the world we live in. It makes me wonder, what other stories are out there that we haven't discovered yet? What other amazing things are hidden in the past?
That's a great question. The past is full of untold stories, waiting for us to find them, to put the pieces together, and understand human history better.
It's incredible how much we can learn from these people who lived thousands of years ago. But it's not just about the past, right? I mean, what can we, in the 21st century, learn from the Amorites? What makes their story relevant to us today?
That's a really great question. And I think one of the biggest takeaways, one of the things that really stands out, is how the Amorites make us rethink what we believe about cultural identity. Like, they weren't just conquerors, right? And they weren't just people who adapted. They were both. They were changing the world around them, but they were also being changed by it.
It's true.
It really makes you think about how cultures grow and how they mix together. Yeah, it does. It's like that saying, we're all products of our past, but we don't have to be stuck there.
Right. Exactly.
The Amorites, they took who they were, where they came from, and they combined it with this new world, this new life they found. And they made something totally new.
Exactly. Yeah. And that idea of cultures being fluid, it's so important today.
I can see that.
Especially now when the world's so connected with everyone moving around, sharing ideas. It helps us to see that cultures aren't just these fixed things frozen in time.
Right, yeah.
They're always changing, always moving.
Yeah, it's a more, I don't know, a more interesting way to look at things, I think. Instead of trying to put everything in a box, with a label, we can just appreciate how complex and amazing human history and culture really is.
Absolutely. And if we think about it personally,
Yeah.
the Amorite story, it shows us that all of us, we're capable of changing, of adapting to something new. We can learn from other cultures. We can try new ideas. We can, change who we are a little bit and still remember where we came from.
It's like they're showing us that it's okay